Alright, now for the fun part. We're just going to grab a bunch of Video Copilot Action Essentials 2 elements, and we're just going to kind of insert them into our composition, basically. And what we want to happen is, you know, slowly the elements start coming in. There's a spark here and there, and then they slowly start building up until, you know, there's so much destruction going on in the scene. There's some smoke elements here. So I'm actually going to have the first spark come in maybe at around the 12-second mark. So I've already imported the Action Essentials 2 elements here that I've chosen. So I've got a charge here, I've got some firecrackers, which are basically just quick little sparks. I've got some smoke, I've got some welding sparks, and another little smoke wisp. Now I'm working in NTSC here, and these elements are actually 24p, so you have to make sure that you are interpreting your footage. So go to Interpret Footage Main, and make sure that you put in your 29.97 frame rate or whatever you're working at. And then what you can do is just right click on it and say Interpret Footage, remember interpretation. Then you can select the rest of them, right click and say Interpret Footage, apply interpretation. So you don't have to open the properties for each clip. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with some of these firecrackers maybe, which are basically just sparks. And like I said, I'm working in NTSC, so these elements are quite big. So I'm actually going to scale them down quite a bit. So I'll start one there. Maybe a little after I'll put another firecracker element in. Scale it down. This one's cool because it looks like it's coming from the edge, so I could put it inside the screen, or I could put it near one of the pipes. And basically just start adding more and more elements, and I'm actually going to cut ahead until I have something that I like. Alright, so here's what I've got going on. As you can see here, I've kind of got one or two sparks at the beginning, and then slowly the elements build up over time. And then I've got these smoke elements and the welding out of focus elements going on, so let's just have a quick look at the animation. So it does build quite quickly, but you know, it works. So one thing that you do have to be mindful about is all of your layers should be set to screen or add, something like that. So this is where you can kind of have some fun with your project, you know, add the destruction however you want. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of these, and I'm going to make them shy layers, which I've done already, and I'm going to hide them, and I'll hide them from my composition. So what we're going to be doing right now basically is working on the section where the glass actually explodes. And to do that, we are going to be using another texture from CG Textures. It's this broken window texture. And there's a lot of broken window textures that you can use, so this is just the one that I picked. And let's put it here in our composition. So we're going to scale it down. And I don't want it to crack right in the center, maybe off to the side, something like that. And I'm going to put a mask around it, just to make sure. Alright, I will set the blending mode to screen, and I'm going to add a color adjustment to this just to brighten it up so that we can really see it. So I want the glass to crack probably at around 15 seconds. So I'll put my playhead there and I'll hit Alt or Option and open bracket, open square bracket, to make sure it starts there. Now to create the refraction effect, if you guys remember from the example, when it cracks, the glass actually refracts the image behind it. And there's a couple ways we could do that. We could actually duplicate the layer and kind of distort it. But the problem with doing that is, since we're working with another layer with a blending mode, it kind of makes things a little bit difficult. So what we're going to do instead is use adjustment layers. So I'm going to make a new adjustment layer, and I'll put it down here underneath our broken glass texture, but above our glass and our meter animation. Again, I'll hit Alt open bracket to make it start there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in on my composition here. With this adjustment layer, I'm going to put a mask around it, just so we only adjust this area here. And then I'm going to apply a distortion effect to it. And it's down here, it's off screen, but it's Effect, Distort, Transform. And basically it's all of the transformation properties that you would find down here in the timeline, just you know, in the form of an actual effect. So I can, you know, scale the layer up the same way I would if I did it down here. But the thing about doing it as an effect on an adjustment layer is I can actually select which areas I want to distort. So for this first adjustment layer, I'm going to add another mask here with the pen tool, and it's just going to be this big area here. And then make sure you set your second mask to intersect. So I've got two masks here, and now when I start to transform the adjustment layer, only that stuff in my mask is adjusted. So from here I can just kind of scale it up, I can rotate it a little bit, you know, I can position it, and then when I'm happy with that, I can just duplicate the adjustment layer, and then on my new adjustment layer I can reset my effect, open my masks, and delete the second mask, and I'll make another new mask. And don't be afraid to get really close with this. Your mask edges will be hidden behind this glass texture, and there will be a lot of motion blur going on, so that will hide a lot of your errors too. Alright. Oh, I forgot to set the second mask to intersect. Always remember to do that. Now I do want to mention that you have to remember the adjustment layers are actually adjusting the adjustment layer below it. So you have to make sure when you're moving stuff around, you might actually see a seam here. So just be careful when you're sliding stuff around. I'll duplicate the adjustment layer again. Same thing, I'll reset the effect, open the masks, delete the second mask, and draw a new one. Zoom right in here. Alright, so you'll notice in the final effect I actually had an adjustment layer for each one of these sections, but for the sake of this tutorial I kind of cut that down a little bit just to speed things up. So another thing that you can do just to kind of add to that refraction effect is to add color correction to some of the sections. So I'm in this section right here, and I'm actually going to brighten it up a little bit just to make it look like the light is refracting. And if you kind of make like a reverse S-curve, you kind of get this like more realistic light bouncing off of the screen. So I'll add another curves to this adjustment layer and brighten it up as well. And this one I will actually darken a little bit. Now these other two adjustment layers that I haven't done anything yet, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Instead of doing a color correction, I'm going to apply a tint filter. And I'm going to make it black. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to alt-click on the amount and I'm going to assign a random value between 30% and 90%. So basically what's happening now is it's pretty much flashing black, right? As if there's a short in the screen or something like that. And I'm going to copy this tint effect and I'm going to paste it in this top section as well. Again, I'll put the random expression there, maybe change it up a little bit, like 25 and 100. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. We have a nice little explosion, the glass cracks, and then we have a nice little whiff of smoke coming out from the center there. So I think that looks pretty good. And then with all of the other elements turned back on, we have quite the amount of chaos going on here. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to bring it into a final composition, but one last thing that I want to do before we do that is I'm going to select everything, make sure that motion blur is turned on, and make sure everything is a 3D layer. Okay, we're gonna do like a cool little 3D camera movement. So most of the layers we can leave where they are, but I would like to adjust the position of these welding out of focus layers. Just bring them a little bit closer to the camera. And I'm going to just switch to a custom view for a second here. And what I want to do is I want to push these pipes back in 3D space. So if I push these way back, these way back too. Okay. What we're trying to do here is create sort of a fake 3D effect here. If you guys notice during the slow zoom of this tutorial, it kind of looks a little bit 3D-ish. And then once the camera starts shaking, you can really see the 3D effect here. So that's basically what we're going for here. So I think that's pretty good. I'll turn on motion blur for the comp, and let's go ahead and make our final composition. So composition, new composition, and this one is NTSC DV, and let's make it 20 seconds. And let's grab our example grunge meter comp, and we will make it 3D, collapse transformations, and we'll add a new camera, and we'll make it 24mm camera. Switch the view to the camera, and let's just pull the camera in or out, I guess, and just see how our layers look right now. Okay. It looks good in relation to this main box, but the problem is they're a little bit too small right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this window here, and I'm going to go back into my noise meter here, and I'm just going to play with the position and scale of these pipe layers, and they will update in our composition. Okay, so now I can go back to my final comp, unlock this window, and let's see what it looks like now. If I pull the camera, that looks pretty cool. Alright, so let's just animate a quick camera move here. So I'll just animate the position of the camera from here, and then 20 seconds I'll zoom it in so it almost fills the frame. And you can see here that the glass is kind of behaving differently than what we set it up. I don't know if this will happen to everybody, but I don't know, it's just a weird thing that I found. If I enable motion blur for the comp, it should set everything back to the way that you set it. So I don't know why that is exactly, but just make sure that your motion blur is turned on before you render. I'm going to keep it off for now just so I can work a little bit faster. I'm going to make a new null object, and this is actually going to be our shake. And I'm going to leave this as a 2D layer, but I'm going to parent the camera to it. I've put a background into this comp, and basically just for this tutorial I used one of After Effects, pre-made backgrounds. I just used this green crystals preset, and I'm going to make this a 3D layer also, and I'm going to push it pretty far back into 3D space and then scale it way up. And I'm going to scale it extra because we're going to have a lot of camera shake going on, so we want to make sure we have a lot of room. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an expression to wiggle this null object. So first I'm going to apply a slider control to it. I'm going to alt click on the position of the null object, and I'll type wiggle 4, and then I'll pick whip the slider control, close brackets, and there. And now I'm going to animate this slider control, so maybe once we start seeing, maybe just before we start seeing the red in the meter, I'll start it, and then right at the end I'll put it all the way up to 40, and I'll just ease the first keyframe. I'm gonna put this first value all the way up to 10, and let's do a quick RAM preview. Alright, so it starts shaking, and we have our explosion. So that's looking pretty good right now. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it where the camera sort of tips over, I guess, from too much shaking. So a little bit near the end, maybe at the 16, 17 second mark. What we're going to do is we're going to animate the rotation of the null, and I'm actually just going to use the pan behind tool to set the anchor point of the null somewhere over in this corner. So then when I rotate it, that's kind of where I want it to rotate from, so it falls down like that. So let's set a keyframe here and just go ahead like 6 frames. Animate that falling down. So this is kind of where you want to make sure that your smoke is not cut off on the top, or your background image. Just make sure that everything is properly scaled and or masked, just to make sure you don't have any hard edges up here. And that's pretty good. Let's just make a bounce, maybe a little bit of a bounce. And I'm going to ease this first keyframe, and let's have a quick look at what this looks like. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I think it's a pretty realistic camera tipping over type of effect. So the last thing you might want to do is just make a little intro for your comp. I made a quick little text intro that says, it says make some noise. And basically all I did for this was I have 2 duplicate text layers. One is pushed back in 3D space a little bit more, just to kind of fake the 3D extrusion, and I parented it to the other text. and then I just animated it flying in, basically rotating and flying out. And I also inserted a camera, which is also a 24mm camera, the same as our main composition. And then I just duplicated that for the word some, and then for the words noise. Make some noise. So I might just, insert that in at the beginning, and then just animate my noise meter on with a mask. Alright, so when it flies out, the noise meter animates on with a mask, and I made sure to make the mask really big because when the camera starts shaking and tipping over, you want to make sure that everything is there. So after that, just make sure that everything is timed properly to the way you like it, and that you're not seeing any harsh edges because of the Action Essentials 2 or any other thing like that. Make sure your motion blur is turned on so that your refraction is working properly. And that's about it. Let's render it out and see what it looks like. Alright, well, that took about an hour and a half to render, but I think it was worth it. The effect looks really good. So that's it, everybody. It's been a long road, but I've had fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys had fun too, and I hope you enjoyed the effect. If you guys have any questions or any other ideas about how to do any of these effects, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to reply. So once again, this is Chris Kaptein for aetutsplus.com. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.